Welcome to The Common Bridge, where policy and current events are discussed in a fiercely nonpartisan manner. The host, Richard Helppie, is a philanthropist, entrepreneur, and political analyst who has over 1 million listeners around the world. The Common Bridge is available on Substack.com and draws guests and audiences across the political spectrum.
Hello, welcome to The Common Bridge. I'm your host, Rich Helppie, and today our guest is Sam Caudle. We're going to be talking about generational issues. The Common Bridge, of course, available free on most podcast outlets, and please do join us at Substack.com for much richer content and fiercely nonpartisan discussion. Brian, I'm going to redo that. And fiercely nonpartisan discussion. Sam, welcome. I appreciate you spending some time with us this morning.
Thanks, Rich, for having me. I'm honored.
Great. Every generation since the beginning of time has faced challenges. Responsible generations, of course, have tried to make things better for the next generation. And, frankly, every generation has screwed things up because part of the human condition is the solutions for today's issues are often the problems for the next. And we're going to be talking to a successful guy, I believe, from the Millennial Generation, if we want to put enough labels on that, in Sam Caudle.
Yeah, very much from the Millennial Generation.
Great. So, Sam, our audience likes to know a little bit about the people coming on the show. So, if you don't mind, what were your early days like? Where'd you grow up, and what were some of your early experiences?
So, grew up in a rural Oklahoma town, Cushing, Oklahoma, around 9,000 people, and with a lot of family around. Being able to walk or ride my bike to my grandparents, my cousins, that was a big part of life. And we had some acreage as well. So I grew up exploring the woods. That was kind of my safe place as a kid. Very early in my childhood, I got into very competitive gymnastics, and that kind of started to shape my worldview very early. So just seeing if I put in effort into something that I like, that I enjoy, that I'm curious about, I will often have rewards. And growing up in a small conservative town, hard work is the way out. And that's the way out for everyone. That's the common sentiment. And so I knew that, and for a long time didn't know where to direct that hard work. And I've been finding new ways ever since.
We're going to dive into that in good order. Were you able to go to college or further your education beyond high school?
Yeah, so I didn't. Right when I finished high school, I went and did an internship with a ministry, just because that was something that I was passionate about at the time. So I moved to Kansas City and did that. Then a couple of years later, moved to Colorado Springs, started working for a big nonprofit out there. They eventually paid for me to go to school. So I proposed that to them as I was kind of moving around in different roles there, and they paid for me to go to school. So I have an undergrad in business with an emphasis in finance.
Great. And so you were with that not-for-profit for some period of time, I understand.
Yeah, I was there for 10 years, and I actually quit 3 times in the midst of that 10 years and came back. And it seemed to work, came back in kind of a different phase of life, and a different, having stepped away and grown some and come back. And that seemed to work really well.
And now you're living in Florida.
Yeah, we're in the Tampa, Florida area.
Wonderful. And we're going to talk a lot about your business today. And I don't expect you to be the spokesperson for your generation any more than I'm a spokesperson for my generation.
Sure.
But there's difference. And, look, I think every generation has strived for, a good, solid, middle-class standard of living. Home ownership would be part of that. Adequate food, transportation, security, in old age, healthcare and the like, education for children. Every generation has had to strive. Every generation has had opportunities. Every generation has had challenges. Can't go back to the beginning of time. I suppose we could, but I don't think we'd find much different. Yeah. But the World War II generation, they and their parents faced the Great Depression. They faced aggressive enemies in Japan and in the Axis powers. They returned to build a middle class in America, and did, I think, a terrific job with that. Baby boomers, which I am part of, we kind of grew up in a golden age. The economy in the United States was booming. The United States had the only modern factories on the planet. Consumers had money in their pocket from working during the war years, but couldn't spend it because of rationing. And we as boomers were the beneficiaries of the schools and hospitals and roads and infrastructure that were built. It was some very, very good times. And then around 1980, we start having the international competition chipping into the automotive industry, and that social contract for baby boomers to have a middle-class standard of living was at risk, just like every generation. And in each generation, people have strived and people have succeeded. When I came out of high school, Sam, which was a long time ago, if I had a high school diploma and a decent work ethic, I could go to the Ford plant or the General Motors plant or Chrysler, get a union job, and have a great middle-class standard of living in exchange for some hard work. Did you have that opportunity as a member of the Millennial Generation?
In a very different way. I think if I would have, so looking at a lot of my peers that I went to high school with that work for a lot of the major oil companies now that have offices in the town I grew up in, they're welders or safety inspectors, and they make a good middle-class living. And in Oklahoma, middle-class living means you have toys, you have the boat, and you have the ATV and those kind of things. And that you're not worried. You're not worried about money. In a very different way, something that happened in my generation, I was just talking to a friend yesterday, we had this shift where we started to care about what impact we made. You remember that about 10 years ago? It was like the accusation toward the millennials is all they care about is changing the world. They don't care about money. And I feel like that's kind of disappeared. And maybe as the millennials have gotten a little older, they've just maybe focused on themselves a little bit more. But I feel like still achieving whatever middle-class standard that the millennials have is different. There's a different path for everyone, and it doesn't exist in the same way. You're completely right. There's not a clear path for me or any of my peers.
Life is much more complicated, I believe, for your generation than it was for mine. Although, we were schooled like the World War II generation and by the World War II generation is to have faith in something bigger than yourself, generally a religious faith. We were schooled to communicate, to contribute to your community, which we did. There were lots of civic organization, lots of ways to contribute, to help those in need, to help those that might be handicapped, to help those who might be discriminated against. So there was service there. And at the same time, I think it was a simpler time until we started running into the 1980s in terms of how to execute that social contract to get money in exchange for our labors. And we were just at the beginning where that split between the physical labor and knowledge workers was just beginning with the advent of the major computers.
Right. Yeah, my father, who's 63 this year, I grew up seeing him work hard. I think of my dad, I think of, as a kid, seeing him sweat through leather gloves. I think of like hard work.
Wow.
But still, he was going and putting on a tie and going and selling insurance and going to his Lions Club meetings every Tuesday for lunch. And he was kind of that stereotypical person you're talking about that was engaged in those kind of ways. And he's always encouraged me, like, don't do it like me. Like, follow your gut, follow your curiosity. Like, there's a more fun way to do this.
Thank you for listening or watching this segment of Richard Helppie's The Common Bridge. On Substack, you can access the full archive and bonus columns, podcasts, and interviews for only $5 a month. At Substack.com, search for The Common Bridge and subscribe.